Welcome to another episode of Sustainment TV. I'm your host, David McDonald, and before we get into today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It will help the channel grow and improve upon what we do. But without further delay, let's get right into today's video. Today's video talks about something that I'm sure a lot of parents have been dealing with during this pandemic time, being able to juggle multiple things, working from home, people having to take time off, getting work exceptions in order to accommodate the children, and many conversations are being had concerning the quality of education just in our country as a whole. And so I was able to get some time out with an educational consultant and expert to run some questions by her and just to see her standpoint where the status of education is in our country. So I hope you get something out of today's video. Hope you enjoy.
All right, Sustainment TV, as promised, I was able to get this interview with a good friend of mine. She's a leading educational consultant and expert in her field. Welcome to Sustainment TV, Dr. Bry. How's everything going today?
Pretty well. How are you?
Doing well. I know we've had some near misses in the past in reference to getting you on for an interview, and everything happens for a reason in terms of timing and all that good stuff. I know that there are many parents out there who they're waving the white flag concerning, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm having to wear an additional hat of being a teacher at home, trying to administrate, Zoom and all of its pluses and minuses. Just wanted to get you on for some questions. Thanks for giving us your time today.
Of course, you're most welcome. I love that point that you just made about how parents are having to wear, some hats that they haven't traditionally had to wear. And their contributions, their efforts, the frustrations, the challenges that they're experiencing, they're not lost on me, not at all. I'm currently in a role of leadership within my district, and I see it, I hear it, and it's heartbreaking, but I applaud parents. They are being called to do something that many have not. So I recognize it, and I appreciate everything that parents are doing right now. This is a very difficult time.
All right, let's get right into it. From your experience, what is the role of a teacher anymore?
Well, I come from a long background. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years. So from that vantage point, the role of the teacher is to impart knowledge. From a leadership perspective, and seeing it kind of more holistically in terms of the organization and our end game, I feel like the role of the teacher is to impart a role of learning. If students have been taught to love learning, they can arise to the occasion when it comes to challenges in life. Things are not, even if you're not necessarily deciding to go to college, you're still equipped with this just natural curiosity that will ensure success by whatever means you call successful.
Do you think standardized testing is the most effective way to judge learning? What are your thoughts on that?
As a private citizen and a former classroom teacher, it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck. And the reason I say that is because every single person is different. I mean, plot twist. I know it's very, nuanced and profound idea here, but we're all different. And so when teachers are being called to basically be 25 different teachers for the 25 different students that they serve, and they differentiate and they scaffold, all of the instructional strategies that teachers employ to meet the needs of students to help them access those standards. When you basically whittle down all of their efforts to a test, a bubble test on top of that, where there's only one answer, where life is not typically A, B, C, D. You have to create what A, B, C, D will be in real life. I don't think that it is an adequate measurement of what teachers do. And I don't feel that it is an adequate scale by which to measure and prepare students for life. I was a good test taker, but not nearly as good as many other of my friends. And fortunately, I attended, universities where that mattered, but it wasn't the sole criteria upon which my matriculation was based.
Can an innovation that worked in one place work in another place, or work in all places for that matter?
I think that's the problem that we're having in education. We try to look to our neighbors, and I don't think there's anything wrong with looking internationally, with looking even domestically, with from state to state, to see, hey, what are you doing that's working? Because we all want kids to succeed. That's the whole point, between federal governments wanting to, just basically produce an informed citizenry, to classroom teachers wanting to make sure that individual people, the little bodies that are in front of them, those people are able to decide for themselves what kind of life they want to have. I think everybody wants, success in that area. So I don't think it's wrong to look. I think it's wrong to, kind of be ubiquitous in your application of it. Like, you have to kind of, that Southern statement, take the meat and throw away the bone. You have to take what you think will work. And try it out, and then, own if it works or not. And if it doesn't, you try something new.
What's your personal favorite moment or experience in your own educational journey?
Now, well, as a student, as a teacher, as a leader,
whichever way. I mean, you can
Okay.
address both or just one.
I can do three. So
Okay.
I have my favorite moment as a student
Mhm.
was a teacher that I had, she was my science teacher in 9th grade. She loved not only her content, but she loved us. She was, a Caucasian woman that you wouldn't think would be in touch with inner city kids whatsoever. Like, it wasn't like a Dangerous Mind situation, but she had a heart for us. She loved us, and we knew it. She wanted what was best for us. And I'll never forget a time in class where someone was disrespectful to her. And a lot of times, when you're in high school, kids won't necessarily stand up. It's kind of like a herd mentality, where if someone, bucks the system, you just kind of put your head in the sand.
Yeah.
That was not a time. That she was a beloved teacher. She taught me for 9th grade, 10th grade, and AP biology in senior year. And we stood up for her because that lady loves us. Like, don't disrespect her. She was also the teacher that told me that I was going to college, and I did not think I would. She attended my dissertation defense. I was able to find her. Thank goodness for Facebook. But I was able to find her, and she attended. I wanted her to see, and she needed to know the impact that she made on my life. So in terms of being a student, it was being in that woman's class, and knowing that I was loved, and knowing that she saw greatness in all of us, whatever that meant. In terms of being a teacher, my favorite moment, I was a primary teacher for a very long time. So in terms of like K2 reading instruction, I'm telling you, those guys are awesome. But I think I'm going to have to say it. This is hard. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. There's so many good moments as a teacher. It's why you come back every day. But I guess I'll say I had a student who asked me a question as we were learning about the Civil War, as we were learning about Reconstruction, as we were heading into the early 20th century and innovations in technology.
Okay.
And he asked me, how would I rank people? And I was like, what do you mean? How would I rank people? And he said, how would you, well, we obviously would say that white men are first. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. While I understand why you feel that way, where's your evidence? Always use evidence to support whatever claim you're trying to make. So he used the United States Constitution. And I was like, okay. He said, so the laws are written by them and for them. I said, okay, I'll go with that. And then I said, so who would be second? And he said, white women. I said, nope, I wouldn't say white women. And then he said, Black men. And I said, why? And he said, because they, based on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, they're the ones given rights first in terms of being a full person. I said, okay. I said, and now who would be third? And he said, white women. And I said, based on what? And he said, the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage. And I said, and so then where would that place me? And he said, wow, like fourth. And I said, so now do you see why education is important? Well, you need to be able to stand on your own, because people already, especially for Black women, you already feel like you're less, you're on the bottom rung. And if you look at even national statistics in terms of employment and rates, salary rates, you'll see this 10-year-old's assertion of rankings is not far off. So in terms of teaching, I guess that was one of my favorites, because I felt like I had taught my student how to, if he wanted to have a ranking, he wanted to have an answer to that question, at least, use a verifiable source to draw some meaningful conclusions. And he wasn't wrong. At least I don't think he was. I guess my favorite moment as a leader was receiving an email from a teacher who was traditionally, I won't say fearful, but leery of administrators. She'd just been burned so much by people who get in leadership and forget what it's like to be a teacher. Forget what it's like sometimes in their administrating, that they have to also be human. This is a human profession. To receive that, I think it was maybe a week or two after starting the job. It meant a lot. It meant I was doing the right thing, and I needed to continue on that track. So I apologize for that long answer, but.
No, that's fine. I mean, each one had a specific purpose. As you mentioned, being an inner city school student, I mean, you defied odds. You attained your PhD in education. Young, much younger than the average PhD, at least from my observance. And then your reference to the student, someone at that age, and the light comes on, and you're just like, oh wow, you got it, and then of course being able to empathize with the teacher on the front lines, feeling unappreciated, and then having that administrator, being able to have have an understanding of what they're going through. So no, it was it was necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a tendency sometimes to speak like I'm still writing a dissertation, so forgive me. You should see my emails; they're awful. I have to go back and delete.
Gotcha. This is a question I know I've spoken about this to some friends. Got some big stances. Want to see what you thought about it.
Okay.
Would you support the idea of school systems providing universal pre-K starting at age 3? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes.
What would be the main reason?
What breaks my heart, I primarily taught in Title I. For my 15 years that I was an educator in terms of a classroom teacher, I taught in Title I.
Okay.
What we saw as the main difference between, I hate to say it this way, but it's just for a lack of a better phrase at this time, kind of the difference between an assessment challenge and an assessment ready environment. Is simply those years of educational experience. They lack context. And a lot of times, especially in Title I environments, you have parents that are working, you have parents that are trying to survive. We're not worried about whether or not what a leaf feels like. So when you got people like I'm just right now, I'm just thinking about just the state of the pandemic and what's happened with the inequities in education here. It's made things more pronounced. It made people, it made the situation in terms of equity very easy to see about how things are not at all balanced. And the truth is, the earlier kids are in school, the earlier they have a formalized educational experience. And I'm not talking about standardized school. I'm talking about socialization. I'm talking about social emotional learning. I'm talking about just the experience of someone valuing authentic learning. I love Montessori education. I think it's great. I've done a couple of studies on them. I'm actually on a research team right now, still investigating it. We're doing a meta-analysis of Montessori schools, but the earlier the better. I will never, ever say, oh no, don't have kids in school that young. Because the truth is, parents, you're your child's first teacher. Education started the moment they left the womb. They learned what you value. They learned how to read your faces. They learned, how to interact with their playmates, with neighbors. They're always learning. And the thing is, they're sponges. Why not? Why not? What would it hurt? As an educator and for my own children, let's get you in as early as possible. You know, I like the idea of something already being kind of paced out. Just kind of scheduled learning experiences for kids as early as possible. Yes.
What role do you think government should play in education? And that's, city, state, and federal. I mean, what role should government play?
I don't have a neat answer for this. When you have people that are too far removed from the classroom making decisions about what's happening, I'm thinking about things like Horace, I believe it was Horace Mann. I may be misquoting, it may not be Horace. Herbert Spencer, that's who it was, Herbert Spencer. Okay. He said, what knowledge is of most worth? That he coined kind of that phrase in that question. Mm-hmm. And when I think about state standards, who is the one deciding what knowledge is of most worth? I hear parents right now. I have a friend of mine whose son is in high school and he is trying to master geometry.
Bless his heart.
I didn't master geometry.
Right. That's why I said that.
Right.
I passed.
And I know, and it's not even like a math thing because my dissertation was on math. It's not that. It's just simply that's a concept and a content area that's just a real challenge for many kids to get, especially like 15-year-olds. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying, who decided that geometry was the knowledge that was of most worth? Who decided that Algebra 1 was the knowledge that was of most worth when we have students that lack financial literacy, when we have students that lack a means of relating in terms of interpersonally with other people? When it comes to just being able to grow your own food, like you don't know how to sustain yourself, in terms of who gets to determine what knowledge is of most worth. I don't think, as it stands right now, our curriculum has seen any meaningful updates to create, able-bodied citizens. I hate to think of it like that in terms of the banking model, because unfortunately that is what education is. It's about producing a product. Mm-hmm. And if we're basing our success on our students' ability to thrive in life, like to just be able to say at 18, just throw you out here and see what happens. I will say that we have not adequately prepared our kids. So in terms of what role the government should play, we've got to work on creating meaningful standards. We've got to create standards that not only meet the needs of our businesses, our economy, but also the needs of people. I think like recently we've made this turn or this transition toward caring about mental health, because I don't know why it never occurred to anybody that, your mind is just as much a part of your body, although you can't necessarily, feel it or touch it, but your mind is just as much a part of your body and is greatly responsible for what is happening within your body.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Like, there's legit a mental health crisis going on
exactly. And this whole situation in terms of what's happening between social injustices and the pandemic itself and what was already going on in people's lives anyway, right. What was happening without those things being added and thrown into the mix. Mm-hmm. I think that just like we realize that mental health is just as important as geometry, I think that we have to just we need to revisit, meaningful standards so that we can produce people that are good people. I say a lot of times we have created good students, but we've done a horrible job in creating good people. Mm-hmm. So if anything, that's kind of the role that I feel that the government needs to play, since they're the ones deciding. And honestly, it's not totally them. It's the powers that be that are kind of behind the glass, the think tanks, the big corporations that are deciding that, this is it. But I think what's wrong is that we just had a long-standing tradition of things being the way that they are, that 10th graders take geometry. And no one ever thought that maybe this is not the best, avenue to take to make sure that our kids are informed. Especially when I just look at just the inequities and the disparities between certain ethnic groups. you know, it's unfortunate. It's almost like a course like geometry or pre-cal or whatever. They're like weeder courses. It's like, if you can't do this, or if you can't rise to this occasion, then you get filtered now into this track.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas if you can, like, I made it through geometry, don't know how I did it, but I made it through it. So now I get to go on to do, you know, other things that, you know, my choices are broadened. And it's almost like it's kind of a weeding out process is kind of how I feel about it. And that's me as a private citizen, not me as an educational leader, but we got to do better. We got to do better about that. Obviously we need the financial support. Can't do anything without it. Nothing's happening.
True.
So government definitely has to be there to facilitate that. But I would also look at House bills. You know, a lot of the legislation that's being passed or has been passed is monetized. It's monetizing education. I'll say it that way. It's just, and unfortunately, the kids are the ones that are suffering.
This next question may tie into a little bit what you were saying just now. A recent survey recently ranked Finland as the #1 school system in the world, ahead of pretty much all the Asian nations and far ahead of the United States. In spite of the United States actually spending more per capita than any country in the world. Now, I know one of the things that Finland does is they require master's degrees, you know, for all their teachers. You have any input on that? You think that's success in a vacuum, or I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a perfect way to summarize what's happening there. It's success in a vacuum. Number one, you mentioned before, and it's absolutely true. I am a PhD and I'm really good at statistics. And the one thing I know you can do is you can make numbers say whatever you want them to say. And you can do that with very little, you know, trouble sleeping at night. But what I will say is this. When it comes to comparative assessments or the ways, you know, the assessments that we're using to compare country against country, and I say against on purpose because that's the point. You also have to look at all the contextual factors that contribute to those results. You cannot compare Finland to a country like the United States. So for me, it stops there. Even if you had a country that's similar to the United States, you still don't have a country that's exactly the same as the United States. The problems that the country faces is unique to itself. So when you're looking at a country like Finland, where it's a very homogenous culture, everyone looks exactly the same. Everyone, in terms of culturally, believes the same thing. Everyone speaks the same language. Everyone, you know, in terms of those cultural universals, everything's pretty much the same. You can apply something like that, like making, you know, as far as you deem it necessary, you think that teachers having master's degrees implies that they're more effective in their classroom. Number one, that's not what that means, because we have a lot of, and I'm just going to say this is in general, we have a lot of dumb, smart people. So a degree doesn't necessarily mean anything, you know, in terms of that, you have to learn, you have to know how school works. But I will say it definitely, hopefully, increases the likelihood that you'll have a highly qualified person in front of children. But to require that, you know, you also have to look at teacher positions as a whole. They value education and they support education, especially financially, very different than the United States does, mainly because of its size. It can do that. And then number two, its priorities and culture are very different. So when I look at the United States, where we have our athletes are paid incredible amounts of money.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's where America places, you know, a lot of its value.
Yeah.
They place their value, you know, in terms of Finland, they consider teachers as highly as doctors and legal professionals. They are degreed professionals and they treat them as such. It's a revered position.
Yeah.
When you revere a position, you know, like law or like medicine, you by nature are going to attract those people who are going to do the work, that are going to get in there and are pretty much, you know, good people. I'm not saying that the United States, you know, is full of people with bachelor's degrees that you know, can't do the job. What I'm saying is right now, the United States, the value is not really placed on education. I think about what happened last year when the pandemic first began, and how everyone was like, oh, we bow down to the teachers, we worship teachers. Teachers are so great. What we do without the teachers? And now it's like, get these kids back in school. We don't care if you die. And it's like, where was all of that? We were heroes a year ago.
Yeah.
Now it's just, it's business as usual. It's back
Yeah.
to, I'm not saying it's daycare, but it's back to, I know people want their kids back in school and they're concerned about their children's socialization. I'm not belittling that by any standard. I understand what parents are going through. But in terms of hailing education and educators as people and degree professionals, that's missing. So until that cultural thing kind of shifts, I don't think that's a fair comparison. Also, I have a lot of data and research on these comparative assessments like the PISA. And without getting myself into too much trouble, I will just simply say that there are many threats to internal construct validity for many of those assessments. You have to look at how they're comparing countries. You need to see who is being sampled in taking those assessments. For instance, I know this is PISA. This is the PISA results. Now, these are not the most current ones because obviously my dissertation was published in 2016. But in 2012, when I was using that most recent data, when they tabulated the United States scores, they tabulated our performance based on 3 states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Florida. And they averaged those scores.
Yeah, I was going to say that's.
Isn't that very interesting who you decided to pull? So then when they did that average, it put us at 467. That was our score average, where countries like Shanghai, China scored 613. And this is in 2012.
Okay.
What I also want to say is the reason how we ranked as lowly as we did was because a lot of times they broke apart regions of countries. So you have Shanghai, China, you have Singapore, you have Hong Kong, China, you have Korea. Like they broke apart all of the Asian countries. So it wasn't like, and sometimes they broke apart just one country into like different regions. I think China, they did in 3 different regions just to kind of make it seem as if they're reporting higher, but they didn't give the United States that same luxury.
Gotcha.
So even though we know that they communicated, we got these scores from Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Florida. They did not rank us like that, United States. They averaged us. Yeah. So when you do that, law of averages, you're going to lose a lot of data. And if you have one poor score, I mean, just think about it in general. You could have 200s on an assignment and 1 0. And you automatically are out. Like you fail. You are failing the class. It doesn't matter that you have those 200s. So when averages, I get it. They serve a purpose, but they're being misapplied here.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But there's a lot of other things that are wrong with the assessments themselves, not just the states that they selected, but the students that they chose to select. I'll say, when people may ask, well, why did that happen? Why are we looking at it like that? And the honest truth is, when I was referring earlier to legislation such as No Child Left Behind and ESSA, which is basically No Child Left Behind Part 2, or 3. I think we're on the 3rd iteration of it now, just with a different acronym. Part of that legislation states that, our government is willing to provide funds for people who are finding solutions to educational ills. And the truth is, if you don't have an educational ill, then you don't get any money. So what do? You try to find places where there can be areas of improvement, which is not a bad thing. You know, I'm definitely a person that is not necessarily always content. You know, like I can, you know, I've accomplished my weight goals. You know, I've closed my rings on my Apple Watch every day. And I'll still find something that needs to improve. I think it's part of the human condition. But I think the sad part about all of that is that it's being, by the time it gets down to the general public, that this is what's happening, that we're trying to continue to grow and we want to continue to learn and prosper as a country. It looks like we're just failing in education. And that is not an accurate picture of what's going on.
It's definitely one of those things where context is key. You know, if you're trying to defend a position, or if you're trying to, I guess, make a bold, you know, you're trying to deface someone else's position. You know, it's all about context. And
I'm hoping I'm portraying the picture, you know, I'm at least illustrating the picture in the way that it needs to be in order to convey what's actually happening. And I'm hoping that, you know, what I'm saying is encouraging, you know, to, especially to parents.
Yeah.
Because it's nothing like feeling like you're defeating, you know, or you're defeated, as if, you know, yeah, I'm sending my kid to school, but am I really preparing my kid? You know, like nobody wants their children to not thrive. Like that's the whole point. Like, why else are we doing this? Is it, you know, while some may consider this, you know, a babysitting service, I'll say that's probably maybe between 1% to 2% of the population. 98 to 99% of parents they want their educational system to support the academic and pro-social development of their children. So I'm hoping that what I'm communicating, you know, just kind of affirms that education is not as awful. No, it's got some areas of growth, but it's not when you're looking at assessments, not with comparative assessments this way. No.
This is definitely something that would warrant another sit down. If I can get you on at some point. I wanted to thank you for your time today. You know, these are conversations, you know, that people may be having behind closed doors anyway, but it's always good to have some light shed on it from a leading professional in the field. So I appreciate you taking this time to sit down with me on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And of course, you know, I'm happy to sit down. We got to just synchronize our watches to make it happen. But I would love to. I mean, I think even if you were to, you know, invite people live, I'm willing to answer any other questions that they may have. I think even as we talk about return to school, I think people need to see a lot of the reason of why we are returning, even if, you know, you don't necessarily want us to return, which is great because, you know, we want to make sure we're keeping everyone safe. It's really an issue of equity, and there's certain things that we just cannot allow to persist when it comes to education, because certain people are being left behind at a greater disparity, at a much greater percentage than others. So I'm willing to answer any other questions. If you want to do a live, we can do that. But I thank you for having me, and of course I'll come back. It's great. Got some good questions too.
Yeah, I'm trying, you know, trying. All right, so yeah, once again, Dr. Brown, thanks for your time, and I hope something was said that can benefit our audience. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed the interview. The questions that we ran by her is not an exhaustive list of questions. I'm sure that there are others out there. You can feel free to send those in. You can list those in the comments. Also, the questions that I ran by her are listed in the description of this video. Thanks again for your time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.